as we promised, and get right into our intended time and focus for today. So, again, thank you for being with us. It is now officially the afternoon. It is also officially spring, and it feels that way. So, hopefully, everyone has the opportunity to think a little bit about this topic with us today together. And then in service of this topic around the importance of reflection and support for the providers, being you all and those that you work with, just take a moment to enjoy spring in whatever way you can today. So our topic, as I said, we're at number 5 of our early childhood mental health essentials webinar series. We're going to focus today on reflective practice for adults, and the subtitle is Supporting Providers, Strengthening Practice, and Reducing Burnout. So, this felt like a good thing to focus on sort of midway through our series, because, not only are a lot of the targets with respect to, understanding the needs of an individual child at this age group really around adult practice and family engagement and all those things, but it's also so dependent on just the well-being of the workforce, and something that I think we've acknowledged at given times, but maybe not really sort of delved into enough as a collective, as a workforce in general, with respect to just how our mental health providers, our family support people, and our educators and early interventionists doing, and a lot rests on your shoulders. So felt important to attend to this topic now. We are recording this just for access for anyone who had the intention to join, and then the tasks of their day didn't allow them to. So just having that as a disclaimer here. And again, thank you so much to Haley and Randy and others who are leading this work and have invited me to participate with you all with respect to this particular series. It's been a wonderful opportunity, I think, to really think about how do we frame up these sort of core concepts. So this is, as we said, the 5th. So it's the last one on the first side of the 2-pagers. We've gone first around sort of the foundation, sort of, understanding the sort of topic of early childhood and infant mental health. What does that mean? What is the focus? We then had a session in mid-February focusing on attachment and relationships, moved on to reframing behavior. Last time we were together, we talked specifically about trauma and toxic stress. Today is about reflective practice. And then next time we're together, which is April 15th, I think that's Federal Tax Day also, we're going to talk about caregiver mental health. So while today is really focused on the workforce and supports for you all as the adults, we're also going to be talking about just the impact of, when we say caregiver, meaning like primary caregiver or family mental health, adult well-being, as we think about the young children in front of us. And then we'll go through August with the remainder of the sessions and series you see in front of you. For those of you who haven't joined previously, although I think most of the names and faces I'm recognizing by now, my name is Kate Sweeney, and I am an assistant extension professor at UCONN School of Social Work, and have the opportunity to participate in a lot of community-anchored grants like yours, really focusing on building up the workforce to better meet the needs of infants and very young kids and their caregivers, their families, with respect to mental health. So it's an honor to be here. Our goal for today, as we said, we're focusing on reflective practice, really focusing on the workforce and the helpers, as some wise folks used to call us. Our intention is to accomplish these 4 objectives that you see in front of us here. So really defining reflective practice, and having a sense of what that means when you think about your particular role in the work, describing how reflective practice really supports professionals with our intention around being effective in our roles, including enhancing self-awareness, supporting self-regulation, deepening relationships with children and families, to recognize the impact of stress, burnout, and secondary trauma on providers. So what happens when that's not there? And then to talk through some reflective strategies and have you walking away with just the intention to apply 1 or 2 with your work. What is an easy lift? A lot of this is, are things that we might know or even recommend regularly to others, but how are we intentional about serving that to ourselves as well, in service of us being the way that, being how and the ways that we want to show up within our work, being more effective and more us, right? This slide you've seen before, but it's intentionally in all of these, really to ground us that if we're going to be talking about adult and provider reflection today, want to ground us in just the principles of infant mental health, that they're always rooted in relationships, and that we're one of those relationships, right? We're going to be working to supporting the efficacy or self-awareness or et cetera of the target that we're working with. So that might be their biological parents, that might be kinship care folks, that might be their teachers, whatever your role is within the system. But that our relationships with those people are central as well. So that this sort of the parallel process of really focusing on relationships. Thinking about this within a developmental context, we always have to consider that. What is a developmental trajectory of ourselves in the work, of the people that we're working with within their own roles, be it educator, be it parent, et cetera, and the child themselves. And again, sort of the parallel pathways of that. And then also just really focusing on a strengths-based and prevention-focused effort, right? All of early intervention is really just that. We're trying to offer supports within a community and natural settings and earlier on before not waiting for things to get too clinical to intervene or support. And this is just, again, a refresher, but if you walk away from anything from this series, it would be sort of the ability to communicate this, that when we think about mental health with young kids, we are certainly thinking about a range of diagnoses, a range of evidence-based practices, a range of ways to understand what's going on with a child. But we're also thinking about, again, the strength-based and prevention-based definition of how we define early childhood mental health, which is the developing capacity to form close relationships, to experience, tolerate, and express a range of emotions without lasting collapse, and to explore the environment and learn. With that, let's get to the topic at hand. So all of our sort of introductory slides are now out of the way. And wanting to, if we're talking about regulation, we acknowledging this is the middle of the day in the middle of your week. If you hold, 9 to 5-ish, Monday through Friday-ish hours, and that you may have been coming from a meeting that felt unsettling, or just the rush of going from point A to point B within your day. So we're going to practice what we preach, and I'm going to play this brief video just really around the concept of sort of being with and self-regulation. And I tested audio before, but if you can't hear it, if someone wouldn't mind just going off mute and letting me know, that'd be great.
Hi, do me a favor. Take your hand, put it on your heart. Breathe in. Breathe out. And take all of your attention and bring it to your left big toe. You don't have to change or shift anything about it, just become aware of it. And then draw all your attention and awareness to your right knee, to your left hip, to the space between your shoulders, to your right shoulder, to your left pinky, to your neck, up into the roof of your mouth, and your tongue, letting it drop, your left eyebrow, and your forehead. Take your hand, put it back on your heart. Take another deep breath. Let it out. Go have a good day.
So thank you for engaging in that with me. And again, it felt important to see that early in our conversation so that we were able to really be mindfully engaged in the concept of regulation. Wanting to, and I'll take the slides down in a minute just so we could see faces, invite folks to just sort of reflect on what that felt like, and we'll go from there. So I'll stop sharing. See faces. if anyone's willing to share what that felt like, or any surprises from that video.
I was surprised. I feel like there's a lot of versions of that, but his randomness and calling, like you're used to going like top to bottom or like bottom to top, but
It's like progressive muscle relaxation.
yeah, like his randomness and calling attention to areas like your left eyebrow, things that caught me a little bit off guard. So I liked that it was a fresh take on it that really helped kind of focus in that moment.
Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. And surprising too, like that you really can kind of like with intentionality go, oh, my left shoulder. Oh, that feels a little stiff, right? Or, and like if I were to ask you all on a scale of 1 to 10, how stressed are you in this moment before we took that video, right? You might have all said, oh, I don't know, fine. What is it, a 5? Right? But then unless when you're walked through a process to really intentionally like unlock the tension in your mouth or release the tension in your shoulders, you can feel a lot calmer. Anyone else? Any other reactions or experiences? Jen says calming in the chat. Thanks. It's often an occupational hazard that we like recommend that to others, but don't do it for ourselves, right? So it's a lot of what we'll talk about today. I'll pull the slides back up. Okay. And again, I think it's something that you'll hear us talk about throughout the course of this next hour, but that I think he demonstrated in that video, and thank you for your reflection, Vanessa. Both our mind and our breath are like the two most frequently used tools with respect to regulation. So they're with us always, but often in our work, we're not noticing that our breath might be tense or our mind might be stressed until we sort of reach a pitch point. And so part of what we'll talk about today is the intentionality around noticing that a little bit more for ourselves and what we can do and what that can do for us when we do that. So thinking about, again, just this approach of like, we're all capable people and, we're fine. And so let's just focus internally on the kids or the families that we're targeted on. And that, just like, we can all know that, a 4 or 5 or 3-year-old is only as doing as well as their parents. Our work with them is only as calm and regulated as we are. And the more that what I've found in this work, and it's, I think been a bit of a savior, is that the more that we're able to sort of focus on that, the more intentional we can be like in the ways that we intervene. And for those of you that are interested in this topic, a lot of this will be delved in much more deeply with when we go in throughout the FAN training. And I know, not to call you out in any way, Jen, but you were with us to do the FAN training this past summer. So if there are reflections that align, I welcome your thoughts there.
Well, and I'll just give a plug for it. It was amazing. It literally has changed the way I meet with families. Like it was probably one of the more career-changing trainings I've done. And I've done a lot of trainings. So yeah, if you have the time and space and you work directly one-on-one with families, it's definitely worth your time for sure.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I feel the same way. I remember distinctly taking it. And again, this idea of, how you show up in the work is proves you have to just be so intentional about it. And when we're able to give to ourselves first, we can actually give to families much more, and have the space to kind of really do all the work of being with them and understanding them, and all of the detective work that we've talked about in some of the preceding webinar sessions around, what is really going on for this young child. That, even if they're a very verbal 4 or 5 or 6-year-old, when they're dysregulated, it just looks like a tantrum, right? And so all of the work of trying to understand them and the context and all of those sort of behavior detective strategies that we need to take on, we're only able to do that well when we're not clouded with our own stresses. And sometimes it's stress from feeling ineffective with this particular case or classroom or family. And sometimes it's stress that's external to that is, part of being a human in this world and and interacting with other humans. But acknowledging that, we've all delved into work where no one is saying everything is going really well, I just want to play with your toys, right? People are coming to us because there are legitimized concerns or endorsed concerns, whether it's developmental or mental health or sort of family need or all of the above. And so a lot of what today is, and we'll delve more deeply with Fan if you're able to join us, is really about, how do we attend to that in service of being most effective with the families that we're working with or the providers, and keeping good people, keeping you all in the work as well. Again, so this idea, and this is borrowed also from the pyramid model, which is a model around, a public health approach to supporting social emotional needs of very young kids, often used in classrooms, but also within home visiting and other spaces. This idea that, we have to first, in order to understand kids that are at quote unquote the top of the pyramid, the sort of the individual intensive needs, we need to kind of understand the environment, and environment, yes, has to do with the structure, whether it be the home or the classroom, but it also has to do with the people. And we shared a little bit earlier that I think most recently in the last session around toxic stress and trauma, kids are biologically rooted, whether it's intentional or not. It's actually not intentional. It's biological. It's physiological to kind of read the room, and the room includes, just the regulated state of their adults. And so often, when adults are just sort of highly stressed, you could have a great strategy around, supporting that individual child, but like the success of that is going to be really around supporting the workforce to be regulated. And again, just another illustration of the pyramid model to show you that, all of this is so people dependent. And so we'll never work ourselves out of a job because people are always going to need supports around, being effective, whether it's in a range of roles, but with respect to regulation to apply those strategies. Oh, thanks. I saw the chat go off. Thank you, Haley, for putting the link to the Fan training in the chat. And you guys have probably seen this or something similar to it before, but this idea that, in order to be effective on behalf of the children or families on your caseloads, we have to focus on the adults, that you can't pour from an empty cup. And that, again, the intentionality around dialing that all the way back to ourselves is important. That, that can feel very inauthentic if said from a provider that is, clearly maybe not to us, but to someone else, stressed, overburdened, burnout, any of the sort of phrases that we often use. So acknowledging that stress impacts interactions, and that the positive thing is that, when we acknowledge that, we're able to do something about that. And so that's what we'll focus on for the rest of this hour. And wanting to invite you all to just share a little bit, and feel free to either go off of mute or do so in the chat, and I can read it out for the sake of your colleagues. But how does adult stress show up in your work? And I know there's a range of roles within this, but the consistency among all of us gathered here is that we work with people, right? None of us are sort of working solely with machinery or anything else. So whether even if it's in a teaming meeting, a grant meeting, if it's in supervision, if it's in directly in a classroom, if it's directly with families, how are you seeing adult stress impact your work? How does it show up? And what helps you or your team stay grounded when that does? And so I'll, for the sake of discussion, just sort of stop sharing so we can see faces as well. Annette, thank you. So teachers may withdraw from activities. Yeah. And that's actually a very sort of strengths-based view of it, right? That, we might, because often the first sort of response to that might be our own self-doubt, right? If it's, oh, I'm not meeting their needs, or they're not liking what I'm offering, or whatever it might be. But how do we sort of also view it as this, they're stressed and this is a lot. And so, what is the value of saying that, right? The idea of naming it to tame it. Support or tag teaming. I'm guessing that's in response to, some barriers to that. That's great. Thank you, Annette. Other ways that people see adult stress show up. Again, it's often not sort of named in that package, high in adult stress, but we can sort of understand it as that, whether it be with families, with colleagues. Diana, thank you. Resistance to previously named goals, right? So yeah, it seemed like a great idea at the time. But when you go back to check in on progress, there's resistance or avoidance, right? Maybe one more. Anger or irritation. Yeah. So a lot of this is, our reframe of sort of, what's under the surface of what we're seeing. And in many ways, that's asking the same for adults that we're asking them to do with kids, right? Which is to understand what's the meaning of the behavior. Like, how do we understand behavior as communication? So how do we understand a lot of anything that feels like resistance, avoidance, anxiety, lack of progress, et cetera? How do we see that more as stress and unpack it in that way? And first, understand and accept our response to that first, right? So when we are practicing reflection in our role, right, a lot of it is doing what you all just shared, and I sort of tried to talk through in reading your responses in the chat. It's understanding that the what might be behind an individual's response to us, and using reflection as a process to notice, to understand, and to adjust, right? And that is always bi-directional, right? If I'm meeting with someone, I have to use reflection to not just get through sort of my, soapbox of a topic that I really enjoy, but like, am I noticing his or her response to what I'm saying? Do I have an understanding of what I'm noticing? And am I adjusting based on what I'm noticing? And then the same for me internally. So if I first see, maybe a lack of engagement in something that I feel like was a great idea, noticing like, what is that bringing up for me? How do I understand that? So it might be bringing up a feeling of anxiety for me because I'm feeling like, why isn't this working, right? Or is he or she not liking what I'm presenting as a solution or an option? And I might be feeling anxious about that, right? My understanding of that, right, is that I might be feeling anxious because I don't yet feel like I've made a lot of impact in this particular problem that we're expanding together, or I feel overwhelmed by the problem that we're expanding together, or there's not a great solution for the problem that we're expanding together. And so how do I adjust that? And a lot of what we'll talk about today, and again, we'll build much further in with respect to FAN, is this idea of allowing for space and pausing, noticing that when we feel more anxious or sort of want to feel more effective, we'll often do the equivalent of throwing a lot of spaghetti on the wall to see what sticks. And that doesn't allow enough space to really sort of go through a process where we're understanding what the other person is really needing or wanting. And so often, when we use an opportunity for reflection or use sort of a whole schema like FAN that's embedded in this sort of value of reflection and attunement, we're able to really slow ourselves down and not just say, let's try A through Z and please feel like one of those things worked. And again, parallel process, like we would never recommend that for very young kids either, right? That if someone is struggling, if they're struggling with, feeding or whatever, you're not going to try, 6 different new foods in one sitting, right? So how do we kind of recognize and walk that back? A little bit from the literature around just the importance of and the impact of mindfulness and sort of this reflective approach for both mental health providers and educators. That when there is sort of training and practice around mindfulness for educators, there's lower reports of perceived stress, sort of self-reports, and reduced burnout. That mindful teachers and support providers show greater emotional regulation, greater self-efficacy. So you can see like, okay, I didn't solve their housing crisis, right? Because that is much bigger than the both of us. But I can see ways that I was supportive and that, we move the needle in these other ways, right? And so it allows for less anxiety around feeling effective in your role with them, and better relationships with students and with families. That when we have improved teacher well-being and mindfulness, they both correlate with better classroom climate, right? So that they're less reactive. All of these things make a lot of sense, but somebody published studies on them to help legitimize what we know to be sort of human interactions, right? That when things are settled, that there's space to be more nurturing and responsive, and to be nurturing and responsive, especially to a group of kids are around the same biological age, but presenting with many different, again, temperament, family conditions, developmental needs, capacity for the given task. Your ability to be nurturing and responsive and observant is so dependent on sort of you feeling settled and regulated in that role, right? So a lot of this just makes a lot of sense, but you can see when it's not attended to and when it is, right? And so much of what I hope you gather from today is both some strategies to do so, but also just the intention around attending to some of these things, just sort of dialing up the volume on some of these things. That, there are certain things that you can't take away for the realities of a classroom, right? But you can, if you help that teacher focus on their own self-regulation, that could be so effective. And then they're open to and more sort of, they have more capacity to, or more space to take up, strategies around schedules or transition planning or things like that. Any thoughts or reactions there? Does that feel true to your work and the things that you see? I'll keep going for the sake of our time and the slides that we want to go through today, but really invite you all to chime in at any point. If anything resonates with you, or you have a question about it, or any of those things. So when we think about reflective practice and how the intentionality of practicing that strengthens our own professional effectiveness, just wanted to unpack that a little bit for you all, because that can be something that, like, yes, makes a lot of sense on, as a global statement, but what do we really mean by that? And there have been some studies and some things published around sort of 3 different buckets of professional effectiveness that's strengthened with this practice. So the first is really enhancing self-awareness. So the more reflective you are, and this makes sense, right? You're able first to notice your thoughts, feelings, and reactions, right? And that's so important to understand how we're perceiving something, the choices that we make to navigate the next step in a conversation or a given task. And so again, the first is noticing, and it's really interesting, when you think about the opposite of that being true, so often we won't really notice that we're overstressed or overburdened or more than normal or whatever it might be, until something not ideal happens, right? Until we have an argument with someone, until we, feel so overburdened that we're not sleeping well or that we get sick, right? And so how do we kind of, elevate the importance of attending to ourselves in service of our work as highly important? As a tool, right? We can only apply, the evidence-based training or whatever it might be. As Jen said, we've all been through lots of trainings, right? We can only apply the content of that as effectively as we are sort of present and intentional about it. And so it has to be sort of part of that. And we're doing so in a society where we're beginning to, to think about this. And there's, things about mindfulness on, Forbes and Business Magazine and other things like that. And we still highly prioritize, being busy, right? And so we're at this sort of tension point within our society of how do we really properly attend to this enough and so that it's meaningful. And I think it makes sense that it would start with the sort of family support and mental health workforce to take it on. So again, just sort of walking through this slide, enhancing self-awareness not only helps us notice ourselves, right? But it helps us understand how our experiences shape our responses. And our experiences, we've talked about this a little bit with sort of bias and understanding culture and how children's behavior is or are responded to. That this really, is incredibly important for us to think about as we're thinking about both the responses to child behavior, but also adult behavior, right? Is there a reason that I sort of have more of a reaction to this parent versus that parent? And again, the allowing whatever sort of feeling or realization of that to be, right? If that's, this person reminds me of someone else from my past or my present or whatever it might be, and that is carrying with it all of that experience, then it's not, applying, anything other than the reality of your experience to understanding your reaction in the moment. And so it's in service of the work. And then, doing both those things, both understanding our thoughts and understanding how our experiences shape our responses, it helps us increase intentionality in our interactions. One thing that I think Jen heard me say a lot during the FAN training was, the difference between the internal dialogue and external dialogue, right? We can have and should be able to acknowledge this is really difficult for me, or I don't like the way that mom just scolded her child, or whatever it might be. Those thoughts internally should be acknowledged and understood, right? And it's worth it, and we shouldn't just sort of push those away. But doing those two steps helps us not have those bubble up if it's unaddressed, because that's often what happens. Is if you leave a pot on the stove unattended, it will boil over. But how can we be intentional and thoughtful about understanding my reaction, understanding more about what's in front of us that might contribute to that mom being more punitive in her response to her child who just wanted a hug after he fell, or whatever it might be. And what's the most effective way to have a conversation with him or her about, more effective or sort of more relational responses the next time that happens, right? So again, all that in service of our work. It supports regulation, which makes sense. So the more that we're reflective that we are, the more we're able to regulate both our minds and our bodies around our responses, and to stay calm with intention during challenging moments, and to model regulation and even practice it. Well, the more that we're aware of these strategies, we can do so with kids and families. And so often, you can get an adult who is stressed, and you can see that as much of the core of the dynamic that you're seeing, to practice these things if they see it helping their child, right? And so we could really see it as most effective for that adult. But if it's in the name of the child, if it's a glitter bottle, if it's a calm down bear breathing technique, or whatever it might be, how do we help, again, see that in the water? And we're going to be able to sell that more, and to sort of support the on take of that new practice if we are able to share it authentically. And then doing those two things really deepens relationships, right? So the more present I am, the more I'm attuned to you and can sort of read those cues, or sort of pick up on sort of ways to connect. That's gonna make meaning in our relationship, and then deepen the work. So that's a little bit about sort of the why of this approach. And again, as I said earlier, we're trying to, in a given moment with a child or family, do a lot of detective work. We do a lot of rule outs first of, could this be X, Y, or Z, right? Could this be illness? Could this be developmental? Could this be trauma? Could this be relational, et cetera? We're doing a lot of rule outs, a lot of data gathering. And in order for us to see that, to just take it in, to sort of not miss really clear cues, and to kind of understand them in the context of the dynamic that's in front of us, we need to be as clear-minded as possible, right? As the glitter in our own bottle needs to be as calm as possible, so we can see through it. And this is a quote that is from T. Barry Brazelton, who used to be known as America's pediatrician. He did a lot of work around just sort of family connections and sort of infant wellness very early on in the 80s and 90s. But he talks about this sort of parallel process of families always saying, is my child okay? And am I a good enough parent? And then Linda and the team at FAN really sort of adding in this other layer of, we have that same process. So if we're a provider, a teacher, family support worker, et cetera, we're saying, is this family okay? And do I have the skills as a, whatever your role is, enter that here to help them, right? And so the more settled we feel, the more secure we feel in those two responses. And the more dysregulated we feel, the more insecure we often feel in these two responses. So how do we kind of, again, use it as data to understand, like, what is my, deep concern around this family or around my capacity to help them, and what are some sort of real solutions within my system or within our community to support them, all in an effort to really reflect and achieve attunement. So again, we'll go into this particular slide much more deeply within FAN, but it's this idea of connecting with them so that we can understand them and deliver support targeted to their need, right? So that when we're mismatched or not attuned, there's a higher sense of anxiety. And often, we're misfiring. So we might be, giving to your point, someone's point earlier in the chat, like we might be giving goals that we feel like are agreed upon, but we're misaligned. And so, we might not discover it until the next session when we go to follow up and there's, lack of follow through on those. But how do we kind of really sort of focus on this idea of cohesion, which requires reflection on our part to understand the adult in front of us and how we can best support. And all of that, right, is important strategies, but can be hard. So this video is called It's Not About the Nail. I'll play it and then we can reflect a little bit on what it can feel like to kind of really see a clear problem in front of us and the other person wants to focus on something different. But how do we, again, sort of stay regulated in that moment to understand, give them enough space to share enough information with us about why their focus might be left and we want to go right. So with that, we'll start the video.
It's just, there's all this pressure, and sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. All of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on?
So a bit of a funny video, and you're welcome to use that in any of your work that it fits. But I think just with the intention of sort of illustrating that a lot of the strategies that we're talking about regulating ourselves and allowing for space for the other person to, again, share enough so that we can reduce that anxiety around, am I being effective? That it can be hard and it can require practice, because you come in with whatever expertise that you have around the problem that they're struggling with, right? But humans are not mathematical equations, and it's not as easy as, well, if X is present, then Y is the answer, right? And so often we have to regulate ourselves so that we don't just say, well, it's the nail, it's the nail, it's the nail, and get to the nail eventually. But maybe first you're doing, some work around button downs instead of a sweater that's pulled over the head, right? In service of that relationship. So much of this is, how do we regulate ourselves through the process of behavior change, which can take a little bit of time. Any thoughts or reactions to that, or aha moments?
talking to
Okay. And the interesting thing about, working with humans is, and ourselves being humans as well, is that, there can be various ways to sort of focus on regulation that can be really helpful for me. And then Haley can maybe use totally different strategies that are much more helpful for her, right? So somebody can really love a mantra and a breathing technique, and somebody else can really like more sort of body-based regulation things. So I have this sort of wheel up in front of you and just offer you the opportunity to take a few minutes to look through it. But in general, there's the theory that there are sort of 4 different categories where we can sort of find regulation. The first is body-based regulation. So, and we'll talk about these more in a few minutes, but grounding, breath work, movement, or rest are all like, how do you regulate the body so that a calm body can then calm the mind? On the sort of other top half of the plate, this reminds me of like a picnic plate that you get, the blue corner on the top is something instead that's mind-based regulation. So the idea that you're going to calm the mind to regulate the body, right? So intentionally doing something to slow your thoughts down, some cognitive reframing of something, some reflection that supports with increased awareness of like your response or their response, whatever it might be. And even just some like noticing of patterns, right? So that, and again, this is what we're asking people that are working with kids to do a lot. Like, how do we understand the behavior in some sort of a way? And a key factor of that would be, when does it happen? When does it not happen? Like, how do we kind of go through some of those routines-based behavior anchoring strategies? So that's all sort of there, right? So I'm going to try to understand it cognitively, and that's going to settle my body because I'm going to feel sort of like I have more of a handle on the pot, so to speak. If you look at the bottom, so we're going to continue like clockwise. So the yellow section here is more support-based regulation. And these are all things that are done with other people, right? So setting boundaries. And this is something, again, if we think about our own temperament, so that can be like highly anxiety provoking for someone, but really, as somebody that feels really secure in their boundaries and has a lot of practice with that can feel like, okay, if I hold my boundary, then that's going to help me be regulated, right? And so again, this is the importance of kind of finding yourself on this picnic plate, so to speak, and really kind of being intentional about how am I leaning into these things, especially when the temperature is raised and I feel like I need them, right? So some other things are co-regulation. And this is, again, something that we naturally do a lot with very young kids. And then depending on their temperament, it can range, but like, what are ways that you can kind of co-regulate with someone, whether it's very physical, like with a very young baby, or even just through conversation. A lot of people talk about this with like song, right? Or, this idea of just sort of regulating with another. Just embracing safe relationships. So if I feel supported, that's going to regulate me. It's again, like sort of calming the mind and body together, and then talking it out, right? So just, again, and this can be, when we think back about the it's not about the nail video, talking about the problem versus problem solving, but just having the space to like just unpack it and talk it out a little bit can often be regulating for folks. And then the last sort of wedge of this, the sort of purplish, is emotion-based regulation. So naming feelings, having self-compassion, reducing overwhelm, and allowing activation to settle, right? So thinking about that glitter ball that gets shaken up and then sort of eventually settles. And that's sort of calming your emotions to then regulate your body and mind. So, I think this is a powerful visual to, again, to really just sort of think about trying to find yourself on. And traditionally, like, no one is sort of spread evenly throughout this plate. But people kind of find themselves as like, the X, Y, or Z sort of really, really helps and supports me. And again, you might not be able to say, well, this is a really stressful day, so I need to go take a nap because rest works for me, right? But how can we be intentional about, really supporting rest maybe before and after we know something is going to be, an intense thing, right? Or same with movement, right? So I can't maybe take a 5-mile run, but can I intentionally like take a longer walk around the building before that next meeting, if I'm feeling dysregulated in my body. So, again, just invite you to find yourself here, and again, be just more intentional about those practices. And we're gonna unpack a couple of these here. So the mindful self-regulation practices, which are all really found here, we're gonna unpack. So this idea of breathing, and if anybody has either taken like a spinning class or a yoga class, like an aerobics class, the instructors will often talk about releasing breath or holding breath, right? So breath can be very powerful for both, sort of focusing the body or reducing stress in the body, releasing stress. You might notice that when you're more stressed, you hold your breath or you talk faster, right? So the intentionality of not just being submissive to that, right? That breath lets me know how I'm doing, but how can I be intentional around using my breath, whether it's deep breathing or slowing my breath or holding my breath. There's a range of different strategies. You can find so many that can help you again sort of focus, especially if you're going to go into a classroom or a family or a session or a home that was really hard last time you were there. The second one here is grounding. And again, these are the more sort of body-based ones. And grounding is, the kids today say like, go touch grass, right? That's from grounding, right? It's this idea of really sort of rooting yourself in your seat. A lot of times if you do those like mindful, like those guided meditations or sort of mindful videos, they'll say like, put your feet firmly on the floor, right? Or sort of, like have you sort of be conscious of where you are in your seat. And a lot of that is sort of, again, sort of grounding your body. You can see here, they're talking through like looking around the room and finding 5 things I can see, 4 things I can touch, 3 things I can hear, 2 things I can smell, and 1 thing that I can taste, right? And it's just going from like racing thoughts and sort of, any of the catastrophizing or sort of, big sort of anxiety things that can come up within us, and just settling ourselves to focus and slow, right? Again, using the body to calm the mind. And then the other 2, these are a little bit more mind focused to calm the body. So self-talk is any kind of prayer, mantra, saying, et cetera, that sort of works for you to kind of help sort of focus you or pull you in. And then imagery is just what it looks like. So having, an image or a photo, something that you can return your mind to. Sometimes people will like close their eyes and return to like a playground or a vacation space that they used to always go to as kids, right? How do you kind of use your mind to bring you back to a physiological state that is calm? Like anything, and very much like ice cream, it's often great to sort of combine 2 of those things. So you might combine a mantra with an image, right? Or you might combine, breathing with imagery, right? But again, it's not like one thing works for everybody, but how do you kind of find yourself in those spaces and have something that you can pull on either in the moment when you feel like I feel really dysregulated, but I have to sit here. Or again, as I said, a lot of this is before and after, like, how do I unpack that? How do I prepare for that? So that I can be effective, so that I'm not, losing myself in the moment. And thinking about reflection as a core practice, understanding that, it's the intentionality to pause, to notice, to understand, and to choose how to respond. That those can be done either individually, in a team, within supervision, so one-on-one or sort of small group, and within coaching, right? And again, the value of that before the strategy, before you're stressed, but here, do one more thing, right? How do we kind of regulate so that we feel the increased capacity to take something else on, or to reinforce to the person that you're with, like, I'm here with you, right? Feel like we're going to try this and it's going to be hard to ignore the tantrum at first, but I'm here in the room with you, right? So again, a lot of that is sort of the regulation before. And wanted to just ask you all as well as we sort of close out, we have a little under 10 minutes left, but just within group settings, like, are there ways that you could see fitting in or already do fit in, whether it be brief check-ins or some sort of process that you use to support sort of group reflection or regulation? Yeah, Catherine, I'm just reading your note in the chat. The nail video reminded me people don't care much. Uh, People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's a beautiful, and again, that's a great mantra, right? Of like just sort of help me slow myself down so that I'm communicating first that I care before I'm giving a bunch of strategies around what to do. When I show genuine care, people are receptive to what I have to say. That's great. Thank you so much. And you have 2 hearts from colleagues in the chat. I know that was a little bit, before this part of the discussion, but, I think that applies so much to colleagues as well, right? So how are we doing that? Really sort of creating or facilitating a community of support, of regulation, of seeing each other in the work, so that we can call upon them when we need and be there when others need. Jess, I would love to implement a check-in with caregivers at the beginning of home visits, but it feels awkward. Come to FAN and we'll talk directly about some strategies to do that if you can. And here actually is, and you'll get this as a resource with the slides when Haley sends them out, but it is a way to do some of these check-ins. So this is organizing reflection in teams, but this can definitely be done one-on-one, is just, how am I arriving? So what are a few words that describe how you're feeling today? Reflection from last week. So what's one thing that went well, one challenge that you're carrying forward, one lesson or insight? The focus for this week, my top priority or goal is X, Y, or Z. And that can go from like, I don't know, I'm just overwhelmed. I haven't even looked at Tuesday's schedule to like, oh, okay, well, let me do that. Like let me not avoid the thing that I'm telling you is stressing me out, and kind of, with a regulated other, kind of just go through that. Okay, looking at the week, what would one realistic goal be, right? What's a small step I can take toward it? What will I need from my team or supervisor to support me? Well-being and balance. What's one thing I'll do to take care of myself this week? My energy level today is low, medium, or high. And team connection. So what's one appreciation or shout out? What's one thing that can help me help this week feel a little bit lighter, right? And again, this is a lot. That would be a lengthy conversation if you do all of those, but sharing this with the intention of like, maybe you unpack 1 or 2 of those things, and you could try it certainly within home visits or within family check-ins, also within a check-in with a colleague or sort of a team-wide meeting. But just even, and so many of these are done over Zoom or Teams or WebEx or whatever platform now, right? And maybe it's just, asking people to sort of just check in via the chat with 1 word of how are you feeling today? Or what's your energy level today? Low, medium, or high, right? And some directors or administrators will say like, well, what do I do with that information? Or I don't want to create a thing where everyone's just complaining. And it's not that. It's really like acknowledging like, okay, Heather, I was going to ask you to do this, but you signed in with low energy. Like, totally understand that. Like, what's a realistic time frame to do that today, right? And you don't need to know the why, right? But it's just how are you today? Might be something that you could fit in. Okay, so Liz is in a recovery court, CSB worker. I meet with participants. Sometimes I find it repetitive. I would love to use this. Awesome. Again, we'll get the slides, but this is a particular handout that I can send as well. And so many of these things are like, right, not going from 0 to 60, not fitting all this in, but what's one part that feels like it's liftable, it would fit within your routine or sort of the interview structure you're already doing. And again, these are just a couple of different mindfulness sort of affirmations for those who nurture young minds. I cannot take credit for this. I found this on Google, but just, some of this is like, what do you need to say to yourself? But also if you're working with educator, child welfare provider, someone within the court system, et cetera, how do you help them sort of take on some of these things? Today is going to be tough, but I'll find moments of fun and laughter throughout the day, right? Today I will celebrate small victories and tiny hands, right? So, I can't take this thing away, but I can sort of, be intentional about seeing small things, and how much, again, like what we focus on, can shift with that intentionality. Real quickly before we close out, Gabby Bernstein is someone who does a lot on sort of self-reflection and mindfulness. And she has a great tool here that I just wanted you all to be able to walk away from or walk away with rather, sorry, because you can use it in any moment, even when you're sitting in conversation with someone else. So I will stop talking and let her tell you.
Here's a practice that I love, and it's very simple. You place your thumb to your pointer, then your thumb to your middle finger, then your thumb to your ring finger, and your thumb to your pinky finger. And you practice this method of a mantra and a mudra. Peace begins with me. Thumb to the pointer with peace. Thumb to the middle finger begins. Thumb to the ring finger with. Thumb to the pinky, me. Peace begins with me.
So again, something super simple. And you can either use her words or find different words. And it's something that you could also like really easily do. I'm doing it right now, and it's not distracting or noticeable to the person that I'm sitting and talking with, right? So it could be something that you're really guiding them through, or you could sort of do it simply with your hands folded for your own sort of settling.
Here's a
And with that, I think we'll close with this is a video just showing what someone who's responding to a child in distress is able to do if they're really focusing on their own self-regulation and the child's regulation. So I'll play this as well.
Hey. Oh, sweetheart. Hey. It's okay. Look at me. Look at me. I know that this feels really overwhelming at the moment, but you're going to get through this, okay? This emotion, it's going to pass. It doesn't last forever. It's gonna be okay. I got you. Hey, let's breathe together. We're just gonna slow it down a little bit, okay? I'm gonna breathe in for 4, hold for 4, and then breathe out for 4. You ready? Just keep looking at me. Breathe in. Hold. Breathe out. You're safe. You're gonna be okay. This is gonna pass. Just keep breathing.
And so sometimes we're doing that with, the person on the other side of the camera. Sometimes we're doing that for ourselves, right? And so it can take just a very few moments, but really sort of fill you up for this work. And we are at time, so wanting to thank you all for being here. I'll hang on if anybody has any questions, but hope that people are able to practice the topic today of self-reflection by walking away with just, the intention of applying one thing. And I will see you all on the Zoom screen soon. Thanks all.